Welcome, everyone. We're going to start the residential boarding schools town hall now. Welcome, welcome. Ani Wasna de Kwe Indigenakas, Wakanaka Singo Dawa Nadojiba. I am Andrea Pierce. I'm the chair and founder of the Michigan Anishinaabe Caucus, the first and only Anishinaabe Caucus. Surprisingly, that's what I thought when we decided we needed one. I went and found out we didn't have a caucus at convention with Dana Nessel and the Democrats, and came back. I was really upset. I've been working on a lot of issues and working towards shutting down Line 5 and just a lot of issues, and thought that we needed this to help us move forward. It has been helping. We also need to get candidates running for office. So if you're interested, please contact us. We have a webpage, AnishinaabegCaucus.org. You can get us on Facebook. We got the Anishinaabe Caucus Facebook page and the Anishinaabe Caucus group. We have an email, AnishinaabeCaucus@gmail.com. So we're easy to get hold of. So please join us, come and run for office. We got issues that we're working on. I'm going to read the MVP land acknowledgement. We got this now. Actually, this caucus helped to write it. Actually, we did write it. Somebody said, hey, everybody's doing land acknowledgements and we don't have one. Got it passed on the Democratic floor with about 6,000 people. And we wrote a land acknowledgement that is now being read at every event that has MVP that they're a part of, the Democratic Party. So we're doing good things. So the state of Michigan occupies the ancestral, traditional, contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, the Three Fires Confederacy, the Odawa, Ottawa, Ojibwe, Chippewa, and Potawatomi. The Michigan Democratic Party recognizes historic Indigenous communities in Michigan and those forcibly removed from their homelands. We further recognize the ongoing relationship of dependence upon and respect for all living beings of earth, sky, and water. In offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty, history, and experiences. Here, I'm going to introduce Julie Dye. She's going to be our first speaker. And she is an enrolled citizen of the Pokagon Band Potawatomi Nation and third and fourth great-granddaughter of prominent tribal leaders Simon Pokagon and Leopold Pokagon. As an active Native rights advocate and environmental activist, she works to improve the lives of Michigan's Indigenous people through education and political action. Julie is it ARCIS?
Yeah, it's ARCIS.
It is ARCIS. Okay, I was wondering. Center for Social Justice Leadership, the Kalamazoo College. Regional Fellow, a graduate of Southwestern Michigan College, and currently resides in Dowagiac, Michigan. She serves as secretary and founding member of the statewide Anishinaabe Caucus of the Michigan Democratic Party, board directors for Kalamazoo Erase, vice chair of Pokagon Band Elders Council, and SMC founder board director or foundation board director. Welcome, Julie Dye.
Thank you, Andrea. Minogish Get Ginwa, Kachimi Gwach, to everybody in attendance for this important educational event tonight. I'm honored to be a part of this with Dr. Graham Denton, who will be delivering the questions to our speakers from the audience. And Dr. Graham Denton is an enrolled member of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes. He's also an active member of the Anishinaabe Caucus. He currently resides in Monroe, Michigan, where he practices chiropractic with his father, who is an enrolled member of the Cherokee Nation. Graham is currently involved in the project to remove the Custer Equestrian statue in Monroe. He's passionate for activism concerning the Indigenous rights and sovereignty. His goal through education is to eradicate oppression for all groups who find themselves marginalized. So Doctor, if you put your questions in the chat through the evening or on Facebook through the evening, Cami Volkitz is also going to be assisting with delivering the questions to Dr. Graham. And after the presentation tonight, we will have a 10-minute break, and then we'll go into the question and answer. With that, I will introduce our speaker, Meredith Kennedy. Meredith is Waganakasing Odawa and proud mother of 6. She is a graduate of NCMC and Ferris State University with a background in educational leadership. Her career has focused on serving her tribal communities, 17 years in the areas of environment, education, culture, mental health, and substance abuse, with experience as a director within the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians government in the Intertribal Council of Michigan. In addition to being the founder and executive director of Miigwech, she is a small business owner, Native North Tours and Storytelling, has an appointment on the Odawa Economic Affairs Holding Corporation, and is a member of the Think Babies Michigan Executive Board. She considers serving her community the highest honor. Promoting Odawa culture in Manobo Mazawan, the good life, is the legacy she wants to leave for her children and her community members, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous. Her legacy is to focus on the next 7 generations, growing up, supporting each other with love, understanding, and respect. So with that, I'll give the floor to Meredith here and ask everyone that is on Zoom, please mute yourself so we don't have background noise. Meredith?
So ani boju waganak sing odawa kanishna bekwe bapai organishna naman dishnakash migizi indoram and Lanson and Donjaba. Meredith Kennedy Jaganeshmo. And so I am Meredith Kennedy. I am with all of you good people here today with Miigwech Inc., which is tribally incorporated under LTBB tribal sovereignty, and then also recognized by the IRS as a 501c3. And we're going to be talking about residential boarding schools today. We're going to talk a little bit about policy and background. We're going to talk about how we got to where we are, what we're doing on a nationwide, and then also what we're doing locally, specifically with Holy Childhood, because that is the boarding school that I went to, that my father went to, my grandmother went to Mount Pleasant, and my great-grandmother went to Carlisle. So just to kind of give you some of what we're going to be doing is we're really going to be looking at U.S. policy and give everybody a background. So like I said, I'm here today with Miigwech Inc. I volunteer as the executive director. We have lots of programs that we do. And our goal really is to promote Mito Bizadwin throughout Michigan and for tribal people, specifically locally. We have lots of projects that we're working on. We specialize really focusing on veterans, implicit bias, our Council for Healing, specifically for boarding schools, Holy Childhood, and childcare. So those are some of the things that we specifically focus on. So I'm going to start off by something that may seem like it's totally crayon, but what is Indigenous? When we're talking about Indigenous people today, there's a lot of terms that we use. And so I like to ground everybody in the terms that I'm going to be using and how they apply today. So when we're talking about Indigenous as a whole, it's originating or occurring naturally in a particular place. It's native. I like to remind everyone that you are indeed a human being and you are Indigenous to Mother Earth. For our reasoning today, we're talking about the original people before colonization and settlement. If you look up there, I have my nifty little globe of Turtle Island. That's who we're talking about, the Indigenous people of Turtle Island. In today's real world meaning, that's roughly the 573 federally recognized, the 63 state recognized, and the almost 200 unrecognized tribal groups of people throughout Turtle Island. In Michigan, I'm sure some of you know, we have 12 federally recognized. We have 2 urban Indian health centers. We have one hopefully to be state recognized soon down at by Nettawasapi there, the Grand River. We have the Sheboygan Band. We have lots that are unrecognized as tribes, but they are working on that. So that's who we're talking about today when I talk about Indigenous people. Anytime I get the chance, I throw this picture up and my dad's like, I don't know why you use this picture when this makes us look normal. Usually we are cross-eyed, has our tongues out and making terrible faces. But anytime I get the chance, I like to tell people, remember that Indigenous also includes Afro-Indigenous people. So this is actually a picture of part of my family with my dad in the center, my brothers, my sisters, my nieces, my nephews, my youngest one at the top there. So I like to remind people that we need to break stereotypes. I clearly do not look like the lady on the U-Haul or the butter. I look more like the St. Pauli girl. And so anytime I have an opportunity to remind people that we need to break our implicit bias, I will do that. So let's get into the meat and bones of how Indian boarding schools came to be. And this really starts with US policy. This is what I like to call my government class niche style. These are maybe things you have not heard about in class before. You have not dug deeper into those. This is just a snapshot, a very small primer. And so I'm going to encourage some of you to Google these later and you're going to get like, whoa, I'm overwhelmed. So the first thing I like to start off with is before America was America, the one policy that was put in place was biological warfare. So there's a gentleman named Lord Jeffrey Amherst. He was around in the 1760s. And essentially what he did, and this is documented, even in my community of Wakanakseeng up in Harbor Springs, he actually said it's easier to kill us off with a blanket, okay, or liquor, because we're not worth a bullet. And so this was a practice. So it's really important to understand when we're talking about boarding schools, it's not just physical genocide, it's cultural genocide, it's our language, it's our spirit, it's our way of living. Everything is defined as genocide when we're talking about boarding schools. And it's important to note that some of this happened before America was even America. I have this really great picture from one of my friends, Justin Mandosing, and this came because when I tell people that Lord Jeffrey Amherst said it's quicker to kill us with liquor because we're not worth the bullet, if we look at that diary entry there at the bottom, that's part of his diary. Thought that the unrestricted sale of rum among the Indians would expedite them more quickly than powder shot and cost less. Okay. So then I have to argue with people about that. And I say, look at Oklahoma had welfare whiskey as a part of it. It was literally continued while we were, once we formed the United States. So after we get through some of the largest genocide here on Turtle Island with smallpox blankets, essentially, we really have to look at what happened with US policy. And it starts really with the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights. And we are the 27th grievance. And it states, he has excited domestic insurrections among us. He has endeavored to bring the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In the most notorious document that we have, that is the Lay of the Land, Indigenous people are not even considered human. In fact, they're considered a grievance. So I think that's important to remember because this document and being the 27th grievance really, really cemented the US policy that comes forward after 1776. So when we're talking specifically about how boarding schools got created and what their intent was, it's first to know that we were not treated as sovereign nations. We were treated as the Indian problem. There's really three important acts that happened in the early 1900s. Number one is going to be the Indian Civilization Fund Act of March 3rd, 1918. And essentially, this act encouraged activities of benevolent societies in providing the education to Indigenous peoples and authorized an annuity to stimulate this process. So what does that mean? That means that churches, missions were given annuity to actually civilize the Indigenous people. So when we talk about boarding schools and a number of them being run by Christian missionaries, this is one of the acts that started that. The next one would be in 1824, all Indigenous peoples were to be considered wards of the state underneath the US's newly formed Bureau of Indian Affairs. And that operated underneath the Department of War. Think about that for a minute. The Bureau of Indian Affairs was under the Department of War. What does that say about the treatment towards us with the department that we were included in? The next thing that happened was the peace policy in 1869, and President Ulysses S. Grant advanced a peace policy to remove corrupt Indian agents. Remember, the BIA was created, right? Well, we're removing those agents now who supervise the reservations, and they replaced them with Christian missionaries who he deemed morally superior. We also had Captain Richard Pratt. So a lot of times you guys are going to see, like, we even have these really cool shirts that are all over online that say kill the Indian, save the man, you know, with an X through it, like with boarding schools. That was actually a real statement. So Captain Richard Pratt specifically said that, and he delivered it in 1892 during a speech for the National Conference of Charities in Correction held in Denver, Colorado. And this was part of the US policy. US schools had a very specific purpose, these Indian boarding schools run by the government, okay? And that is because they helped the government acquire Indian lands, beginning with Carlisle in Pennsylvania in 1879, and ending with the Sherman Institute in California in 1903. Now, the government itself operated roughly 25 off-reservation Indian boarding schools. Now, the reason that these were off-reservation is because then they could take that land and they could also remove our children and put these in these schools as part of assimilation practices. So if we look at part of the reason that these schools were instituted is also to remove us from our land, to assimilate us. This also has to do with a lot of land grab. And people are always questioning me like, wow, really, Meredith? Yes, because if we succeeded our lands and we removed our children who they know are our future, we have our say in the next 7 generations. If we remove them from our land, then they can do a land grab. So the Treaty of Washington, the Treaty of Detroit, and most importantly, the Dawes Act of 1887. So the Dawes Act meant that what happened was many government officials felt that Indigenous people should be assimilated into American mainstream culture before they became enfranchised. The Dawes Act was passed to help spur this assimilation. It provided for the dissolution of tribes as legal entities and distributed our lands among individual members. So that's only the people who were signed to those treaties that said they were sovereign nations to begin with. This capped at 160 acres per head of household, or if you were a single adult, it was 80 acres. The remaining lands were declared surplus and they were distributed amongst settlers and sold off, so homesteaders. So this is one of those homesteading flyers that you would see. Among other things, it established more Indian boarding schools done by benevolent societies. The Dawes Act really had Indian schools where our children were instructed not only in reading and writing, but also the social and domestic customs of white America to become enfranchised. Some of my research that I've done has come from Mary Annette Pember, and in July 7th, 2020, she put out a great article and she actually traced back how much of our treaty money was given to the Catholic Church. And it's nearly $30 million paid for Native people on stolen land by creating these churches. The government, like I said earlier, we had 25 government-run schools. They were rarely built on reservations, meaning it for Native families, only Catholic institutions. There are some Mormons, some Baptists, you'll see it later, where they were given as benevolent societies. What's interesting is these are thumbprints. So if you think about how we had the Treaty of Detroit, the Treaty of Washington, families would literally sign away their treaty goods to go to the church in order to pay for their children to be there. So now think about this. The US government paid a stipend to these organizations, and then families also paid with their children, but their tangible goods. So I often hear, Meredith, why would people send their children there? Well, a lot of times it was to prevent them from starving because they knew that the church in the boarding school at least had food. Because at the same time our land was being taken away, we could not practice our treaty rights of hunting, fishing, or gathering. So now that, like, as we come out of this era, one thing I like to know, because I hear a lot of this from survivors that I talk to that they know of or it happened to themselves, the Family Planning Services and Research Population Act of 1970. This is where anywhere, because the numbers are difficult to find or substantiate, anywhere from 15 to 49% of our women were sterilized in our own IHS clinics. So they were brought in for appendicitis and instead their uteruses were removed. I've talked to women who have told me that they miscarried and they were coming in and then they no longer had their tubes were tied. It's important to note this because it's also known at Holy Childhood through stories of my elders that our very own children were sterilized by the church, specifically young boys. So when we want to talk about genocide, this is another part of that genocide by preventing us to have future generations. So how did some of this change, right? How did we go from having all these Indian kids in schools that we're confining, that we're having them assimilate? Well, in 1969, Congress, the Senate actually said, you know what, Indian boarding schools are a form of genocide. I think maybe we need to do something about that. So in 1972, the Indian Education Act was passed, which it recognized that Indigenous people have unique education and culturally related academic needs with distinct language and cultural needs. It was the only comprehensive federal Indian legislation that said preschool to graduate level education. So really from about 3 years old to graduate. So you're talking 3 to 26 that now we're going to get services. It focused national attention to the educational needs of how we learn. And then it also provided services that were not provided by the BIA through the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So as a reminder, one of the last Indian boarding schools to close in the nation, not government run, was Holy Childhood. Now you're going to read things that it was 1983. I'm telling you right now, I went there until 1986. So those are, even those dates are somewhat messed up a little bit. So then also we had at the same time the American Indian Religious Freedom Act of 1978 and the Indian Child Welfare Act. What's interesting about this is I will talk to a lot of people in my community with some of our grassroots organization, and they will tell you that the Indian Child Welfare Act stopped from having Kadewiasque come in and steal our children, the nuns, the ladies in the black, but all it did was perpetuate now CPS to do it, Child Protective Services. So one for another. I also like to remind people that blood quantum and just a drop go hand in hand. Blood quantum is what we use as unilateral violence in our own communities, and that's to make it so our enrollment numbers decrease, because if we no longer have the numbers to enforce our sovereignty in our treaties, they're no longer valid, and now the government gets our land. Whereas just a drop happens in our Black and brown communities with our relations there, that says if you are just a drop brown, you're Black. So I like to use the reference of President Obama is always known as the first Black president, but his mom was also white. And he was raised by a white family. And so I always like to remind people that he was also mixed. So those two policies go hand in hand. And that was part of if we can take the land and keep the workforce, then we can ultimately control. Like I said, there's still a notion that goes around with Indian boarding schools that boogie women, we call them Kudewiasque in my community, that's historical trauma, and that also has to deal with CPS, Child Protective Services. So I know that there's going to be a couple reports coming out in the future, because I have gotten wind of those, of how Catholic Indian services or adoption services have actually perpetuated the idea of assimilation in boarding schools. I also like to remind people that our relatives in First Nations were also subjected to highly unethical nutritional research, basically starvation. So these are some of the spoken and unspoken policies that have happened to Indigenous people here on Turtle Island. So this was great. I got this. I highly encourage everyone who's listening today, either in person or in this recording, please look up the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. They have a lot of really great information. They have a lot of really great resources, one of them being this. And what's interesting about this is it really breaks down Indian boarding schools by denomination, by if they were run by the state or the government. And then they also note really important facts within their website too. One of the things they state is by 1926, nearly 83% of Indigenous school-age children were attending boarding schools. There was 367 boarding schools in 30 states, and they're all listed out here. One of the other facts that they provide is in 1900, 20,000 children in boarding schools. And then by 1925, 60,899 children were in boarding schools. So there was a huge jump within that period. And I also want to remind people that's during like at the time where a lot of our tribes were getting, with the Dawes Act being enacted, we're actually getting stripped of their sovereignty. I also want to note that this does not include all orphanages. So it has 5 here in Michigan, but as I've been talking to people, this is not actually an inclusive list. This has the main players, but it is not an inclusive list of everyone. So I'm going to transition to what I specifically know, just as a background for some people. This is Holy Childhood. So I'm going to take a break for a moment and have all of you good people listen in. So for some of you joining, now you kind of have like a background of US policy, kind of where boarding schools were. So let's talk about Michigan. I'm going to talk about what I know. I want to note to people that in the chat, if you're in Zoom, there is a link for a crisis center. I want everyone to know that I've been informed by Dr. Denton that he included the link into on Facebook. I encourage you, if you need to step away with the next couple things I'm going to show, because these are from survivors, practice self-care. Okay. Do not feel obligated to stay here and listen if this is causing any trauma for you. And there is a crisis line that I did include. So these photos are from a Little River citizen, Lucy McClellan Hunter. And I just, if she's ever listening, I want to give a big shout out for her for some of these. So this is Holy Childhood. Important things to remember about Holy Childhood: longest running Indian boarding school operating, 1986. Not everyone experienced a bad time in schools. That's what I think people also need to understand. And it's everybody's histories are unique. Yes, there was trauma. Yes, there was physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. Absolutely. For me, because I went to Holy Childhood, I was so young. I was young when it closed because I'm only 40 years old. So I want people to remember that. A lot of people always think this is my grandma and my great grandma and my dad. No, I am 40 years old. I turned 41 in 2 weeks. I went to school when Wham was on the radio, when Michael Jackson was on Casey Kasem's Top 40. And people want to know all the time, like, Meredith, what was the most impactful thing for you about Holy Child? And I let them know it's when I was in my 30s and they were redoing the road in Harbor Springs and I was collecting my ancestors. I was given 2 days when they were digging up the road to collect our ancestors, and anyone I couldn't collect got paved back over. That's what was most impactful for me for Holy Childhood in my personal experience. That we do have ancestors still under the road and under the park in Harbor Springs. So with that, I'm just going to share a little bit about the impact and some personal stories from 2 wonderful elders that I'm really, really happy to be able to call my Nijikwe and my friends. The first video is going to be a little bit loud. That's from Elder Melissa Moses. So if you want to turn down your speaker just a little bit, it's because of how this video was recorded.
A safe place called love. Who can answer? Where can you find it? When can you give it away? My love story is a circle, even though it started out in a box filled with pain as only a child can see into and look out of. We all know the feeling. Childhood pain of what felt like abandonment. My first box was a poor man's house, a tar paper shack. Those first 5 years are vague, but I hang on to the memory like I really lived to cherish it forever. Life could have been so much different if I stayed. The next box is school years. Holy men, regimented activities, Catholic upbringing. This love came in what I perceived as denial of my being Native. The hand is swifter than the eye. Physical abuse, because I didn't know when to run. If I did run, I didn't know where, and though I knew I wanted to, I did not. I was forced to stay in their mercy. I learned a feeling called hate that stemmed from abuse done in the name of love. My next box was a Department of Social Services who gave me foster parents. These parents caring for children 3 months out of the year. This love came from knowing this wasn't everlasting, because they had an option of releasing you if you didn't fit into their box. I had 6 different families in 8 years. I learned at an early age that I did not want anything from anybody that could be taken away from me. As I became a parent and loved my own family, the one I got to create, life became real, but I was still running towards a love I couldn't give. I gave them fractional love. Today and over my past adult years, I came to believe in a word love and released the past. I mean to grow into the future and continue the journey with my Creator and my family and my extended family of the Anishinaabe. Now, my love story is a circle.
so that video was done with Little Travers Baby Ends several years ago. Melissa Moses is part of our healing council for Holy Childhood. And so I just always give her props because it's so hard to come forward with your story. So my next elder, I had the privilege of meeting several times, and she is so cool. Kim Fike, Elder Kim Fike, and she lives up in the Sault Ste. Marie area. This was actually from the September 30th vigil that we held right in front of Holy Childhood.
Hi, my name is Kim Fike, and unlike a lot of people that had to come to this school, I chose to because my mother died when I was 8 years old. My dad didn't know how to take care of me. He was a white man. I came down here with my older sister to go visit her children who were here, and I thought it was a good place to be, so I decided I wanted to be here. So my sister and my father worked it out. I'm not sure how, but I got to stay. I was only here from 1971 to 74. I have to say I was not physically abused. Mentally abused, yes, because I'm Indian. But what I saw here happening to other people that were close and from Mackinac Island like I was just unbelievable. Halloween was the worst day of the year for me. My first experience to the first year I was here, I was a little girl in the small dorm, not knowing what was going to happen. I know other girls already have been through this year after year, but they knew the witches, the goblins, the devil's going to get you. How many times have you heard that? To me, the devil is dressed in a nun's outfit. I was raised Catholic. I learned their ways. From there, growing up, well, let me say this. My dad died in 74, so I left here in 74 for his funeral, and I never came back. I met a girl here named Judy Basna, who her mother and my father, while we were here in this school, got married. And the nun that took care of us brought us together and just shoved us to each other and said, "You guys are sisters now." Well, instantly the claws came out. Me and Judy really never got along. I got along with her brothers, but not her. And I think it was because of the way we were brought together as stepsisters. I'm the youngest of 10. My dad's only, but my mother's 10th child. 8 of us attended this school. My oldest 3 sisters that are in their 80s now say this kind of stuff didn't happen to them. I can only imagine that it was the different nuns that took over the place and changed and came and gone. Because I can't believe that they didn't go through what us kids went through. Halloween night, like I said, my first Halloween here. I'm laying in my bed, we're all ready for bed, and all of a sudden you just hear this roar. It sounded like a herd of buffalo coming from the big girl's room. They came running so fast and hard, and so many of them, that they came through the nuns' quarters into the little girls' quarters and ripped the sink right off the wall. That's how hard they came running through, screaming and yelling and crying, and I didn't know what to do, so I just laid in my bed still as I could be, covered up and pretending I'm not there. And then it started to quiet down, and I, peek out of the covers, and what I saw come rolling out from the bed next to me was this big black object. It rolled under my bed and started pushing me. And I sat there trying to be as still as I could, not saying a word. And I was so scared. And every Halloween we had to go through this. We'd go into the dining room, we'd have dinner. And in the meantime, they obviously were out there pouring the devil's powder all the way up the stairway to the 3rd floor. And we were told, don't touch it or the devil would get you. So you imagine all these little girls holding the railing and trying to step on the sides of the thing and not touch the powder, and it was all over our bedroom. Our bedrooms were destroyed. We had to go look for our mattresses and our dressers and our clothes and get it all put back in place before we could go to bed. Like Mary or Marilyn had mentioned, they would take us in a truck, just the girls, and drop us off in the cemetery somewhere up over in there, and make us find our way back to the school in the dark. I was with Tina Raffle when she fell on a tombstone and cut her knee wide open. By the time we got back, the blood had been dried on her leg, and they refused to take her for stitches. Anyway, it was nothing but hell here for us kids, and I just wanted to say that. Thank you. Hi, my name is
So those are just a few of some of the testimonials, and those are some of the few times that people have actually gotten up and spoken. There was another elder who spoke, whose husband, they were married for over 20 years, and he never knew until she spoke out. So let's talk about some of the impacts. The one thing about Melissa's video, Elder Moses's video, is she talks about how she was in and out of foster care, and really not knowing who she was. So individually, the impact of boarding schools is a loss of identity, low self-esteem, no sense of safety. Often people are institutionalized. What I mean by that is they're treated for mental health services and institutionalized. They have difficulty forming healthy relationships because of the trauma that they experience. With families, it's a loss of parental power. Their children are taken away and they no longer have a say. They may not even see their children again. And there was a near destruction of our extended family system. Tribal communities as a whole, we lose our sense of community because our children are taken away from us. We lose our language when children were beaten for speaking their language, and they lose our tribal traditions and ceremonies. For tribal nations, what that means with the impact of Indian boarding schools is they weakened our nation structure. If our generations are taken away and our people don't know our customs and our culture, we are weakened. And it depleted numbers for enrollment. If you were a child in Indian boarding school and then you were then adopted out to a non-Native family, sometimes you never even knew that you were Indigenous. So what's going on now, right? So I just laid a lot on top of all of you. Show me the end of the light, Meredith. Show me that light at the end of the tunnel. So currently, what's happening on a national level? In June 2021, the Department of Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, woo, Auntie Deb, she announced that she would do a federal Indian boarding school initiative. So what does that mean, Meredith? Well, invitations were sent to tribal leaders. Now, this is important to remember this. Tribal leaders on September 28th. There is consulting going on. There was 3 webinars. I was part of the last one. Oral and written comments can be put in. And then hopefully Deb Haaland will actually have a report to all of us on April 1st of 2020 with what Indian boarding schools are doing, the impact that they've had. These are some of the things that they actually asked for consultation, right? So the initial purpose of this initiative is an initial collection and review of department documents, records, compilation of existing data within the department's jurisdiction. So they're really looking at what do tribal nations need and how can people come forward with some of the things we need. Now, remember when I said it was sent out to tribal leaders? The issue with that is because of the nature of Indian boarding schools, for example, Holy Childhood, we didn't just have Little Traverse Bay Band citizens there. They took children as far as Wisconsin. They took children from Canada. So it's not just our tribal governments who need to respond to these. I encourage everyone to respond to some of these questions. So I'm just going to backtrack here and say, please send your comments to consultation@bia.gov. And I'll make sure that that is put up once again, because they want to know. And I made that very clear when I was on the consultation last week, like, hey, I think I'm the only person here that is a regular tribal citizen, a boarding school survivor, who is saying I'm not part of a government entity. I'm part of a nonprofit that is trying to heal our community. And so please ask those who were there what they need. Ask those families what they need. And recognize that we've been trying to get records and trying to get this information because we know our families are broken up, and we've lost people in our communities. The other thing that I think is really important with some of their definitions that I would encourage all of you to take action on is how they define Indian boarding schools. Currently, they are not including those from Christian missionaries, and that is the majority of our Indian boarding schools. They're currently not including that in the definition, which I think is really important to include, considering the US government, via policy, via a little history lesson I gave you, actually paid those benevolent societies to assimilate us. And so I really encourage them to define and broaden their definition. So locally, what do we have going on locally in Michigan? I'm only going to talk about Holy Childhood, and I apologize, I just don't have enough to talk about Mount Pleasant or Baraga School or any of the orphanages. So I just kind of wanted to let you guys know locally what we're doing. So we have the Zagawesawi, which it literally means convening a ceremony or council, healing for Holy Childhood. So some of the grassroots organization things that we have going on with Miigwech Inc., because it is all driven by our citizens, is acknowledge the healing for those who need it and provide it as they need it. So really looking at who needs healing. Is that just talking to someone? Is that finding a support service? Is that actually having a pipe ceremony? We also want acknowledgement from the church, the state, and the federal government that boarding schools existed and the atrocities of historical trauma that followed. We're requesting that Elder Melissa Moses, who has many large binders full of information, we're looking for information or assistance in helping her sort out those pictures to document families. She's actually a genealogist. She helped Burt Lake establish some of their sovereignty. We practice every day educating the greater public in our own community about historical trauma and its effects. We've recently been working with Dave Leiden in 9 and 10 and doing blogs from our community and our own survivors. We would love to seek repatriation of our ancestors' remains right underneath where that beautiful chalk drawing is. We're also seeking repatriations in the form of land back and treaty acknowledgements. We are providing programming for parenting classes of generations affected, which is huge. For today, that's what our Day of Giving is going to at Miigwech Inc., is all of them are going to our parenting classes provided by 2 of our tribal citizens who actually do that for a living. And then also inserting curriculum into Michigan-based education about the effects of Indian boarding school and other US policy. So I am working with the superintendent downstate to actually include in PA 170, which requires 6 hours of genocide education, to include, because it only includes currently the Jewish Holocaust and the Armenian Holocaust, to also include Indian boarding schools. And we are gaining traction with that. Next week, I meet with Wayne Schmidt's office to talk about how we can do that. So, and then also getting back our marker, our historical marker in front of Holy Childhood. When they redid the church in the early 2000s, they never put up the historical marker again. So we're encouraging it not to be shameful anymore and acknowledge it in Harbor Springs. So with that, I know that we're going to be at time. I just want to say Miigwech to everyone. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time to be informed today and understanding. I'm hoping it wasn't a blast. I know we're going to take a break because it's a lot to take in. But with that, I'm going to stop my share and hand it back over.
Thank you so much, Meredith. That was great. And so we're going to take about a 10-minute break. We'll come back just before the 8 o'clock hour, and then we'll continue on with some questions.
So everybody knows that there's still time to buy raffle tickets, but time is running out fast.
So here's the things that we have raffling. Our first raffle is going to be for this beautiful star quilt that we have. It was made by Jesse Collins.
It's a queen size.
Oh, it's a queen size.
Mhm.
And then we have a $25 gift card that was donated by the MEA American Indian Alaska Native Caucus to Home Depot. We have a beautiful watercolor by one of our members of the caucus, Colleen Ford. She did this for us. And we also have this wonderful ribbon skirt that was made by our chair, Andrea Pierce.
And it's
So
a tall skirt too. It's tall. So if you're tall, it'll fit you. And if you're short, I can adjust it to fit you.
no, you're supposed to say if you're short, you roll it.
But yeah, I'm also not a Pocahontas type native, and I'm almost 6 foot. So I made it a tall one because these raffles always have one for the little shorties.
So this is what we'll be raffling today. You can go to our Act Blue and you just donate it. We also have wolf shirts that are for sale and our Cluster Equal Loser shirts. And these are the links. If you go to the town hall tickets, the tickets are 1 for $5 or 5 for $20. And you can just purchase them there. And before the end of the evening, if you do it tonight, I'll be putting your ticket in my little box that I have right here. All the tickets in, and we'll be drawing for the blanket, the gift card, the painting, and the skirt this evening. So we have, actually, I was surprised. We have a lot of tickets we sold, almost 100 tickets. So that's really exciting.
Wow.
So I hope that some folks want to buy some more tickets. Just go to our Act Blue link and donate, and we'll be picking it after our presentation this evening. So don't forget, we got our star quilts, our Home Depot gift card, a watercolor by Colleen Ford, and this beautiful skirt by our chair, Andrea Pierce. And we also have our t-shirts, our wolf shirts, and our Custer Equal Loser shirt, and those are available too. So I hope you can donate, or if you need anything, just let us know.
We should have had some music for intermission. I always think of this stuff while we're doing it.
See, that's all right.
And it's Giving Tuesday, so make a donation.
Mm-hmm.
As a new caucus, we're trying to do a lot of things. We pick a lot of very important topics for Indian country, and we still have to support and endorse candidates that will be running. And we're trying to get candidates. We endorse them. We go through and they have to fill out a big packet of what they believe in, and we grill them and try to make sure they know what we need. And then we either endorse or not. But it's a big, long process, and that's Ethel's job. She does that one. She's amazing. And this is all volunteer. All of this tonight and everything that you hear that we're doing is all volunteer. None of us get paid. And if you are, let me know, because I'm doing something wrong. If we don't get, it's all volunteer. This is how much people care about what we need to do and what we were left out of all these years. We did town hall Tuesdays, 5 of them. Can you believe that? 5 Tuesdays in this month. And we covered some really important topics to Indian country. We talked about wolf and the preservation and protection. We have some, they were all of our speakers, I think, were amazing. They really were, and on all of our town halls. It was just, I learned so much. We had I see. Then we had the missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. And we're trying to work on seeing if we can get a like an Amber Alert set up. So we reached out to a couple different tribes in our, in Michigan to see if they were interested. And Little Travers said they were going to try and work on this. So that's our project. We're trying to find if another area has had this. So if you know of a state or a city or a tribe in the US, let us know so that we can, talk to them and find out what worked, what didn't. We had line 5. We found out a lot of good information about that, and we still have to fight that tunnel. We also talked about Monoman, trying to make that Michigan's native grain, which it should be. That's our grain. That's what we've eaten for generations. That's part of us, and we need to protect that for our 7 generations so that our families can continue eating Monoman. So we're working on getting that named. Senator Adam Haye was on the Zoom call, and he said he was going to be introducing that pretty soon when they get back from hunting Monoman. And now we're talking about the boarding schools, which, for a lot of us, I don't know about you guys, but I've had my grandma and grandfather are both boarding school survivors, and my brother and sister went to Holy Childhood. So this touches me in so many ways.
For this portion, I'm going to ask a few questions. I know you already answered it in the chat, but just for those who are watching, we've got about 3 questions or so for you, Meredith. And I just wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for putting on this presentation, and thank you to the survivors for adding those videos, and for the entire caucus for doing all of these town halls. They've really been educational, and they will be available on the caucus webpage. So our first question comes, and it is, I know you already answered this, but for those who are listening in, there were Catholic boarding schools, but were there also Protestant-based boarding schools as well?
Yes, so there was actually 14 denominations, and this list is originally compiled by Dr. Denise Lambouree for the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. So this is where I'm getting my data. So there's 14 denominations. There were Catholic, they were the majority at 80 schools. And then also the Protestants have 2 documented.
Our second question is, could you by chance elaborate on the teaching of Native genocide in consultation with Senator Wayne Schmidt? Is there a statewide initiative? Will this be legislation possibly in the future?
So the great thing about having so many allies, and I'm actually going to call them co-conspirators. So we have about 180 people with our Healing Council and Holy Childhood. And a majority are, well, I shouldn't say majority are survivors and those who are first generation descendants of survivors. But then we have this really great group of white allies, but I'm going to say co-conspirators because they actually take action. So we have a superintendent downstate who has been, I get emails every day, and all those staffers have to send back emails. And so it's not actually a legislation change. We're actually going to be just changing 2 words. That's our goal, is to have them recognized with PA 170 of 2016, which is part of the educational code, to add Indian boarding schools as part of that, because we can document that as genocide. So it's really just making an amendment. And what's awesome is we've also sent them how there's already curriculum developed, because some schools in Michigan are already teaching this as part of PA 170. So there's not necessarily, it's my little group from Harbor Springs who is like, hey, what can we do to help, and how can we amplify our voices to help? And what's great about the superintendent is he's also Catholic. So here we have someone who identifies as being Catholic and in a position as a superintendent to actually help us. So that's what's really impactful, is these are really also human rights issues. And to have people identify that is really great. So it's just an initiative. I'm going to take we have a Facebook page. And so one of the things on our Facebook group is you have to identify if you're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, and then also why you're here. And so I have this great data collection of people who are ready to speak and who want to take action as Indigenous people. And so I just go through my list and say, hey, are you available? Because I finally got a meeting with someone who who is ready to help us. So it's not necessarily a statewide initiative. We're hoping that we can have enough support through even our local with John DeMoose in our area, because we're constituents and we vote, to have them take notice. And so it's just our little grassroots group taking names and kicking bottoms.
And I think if you gave the caucus that information, if we could highlight that group in any way that you thought possible, that anyone, Indigenous or not, could become allies and what they can do, those listening, I'm sure, want to get involved. And actually, when someone found out today that I was putting this on, they kind of privately asked me, and this is sort of another question, how can they get involved? And then also, what do we think that the end game is from the federal investigation? What would we like to see happen? The Indigenous communities, I know we can't speak for all Indigenous communities, but certainly many specific ones in Michigan.
Yeah, so I will definitely go ahead and put the McGuinch Inc. website up there with our like we have all of our stuff that we're working on that came right from our group of people. So I would love support. Support can even be as simple as sharing a presentation so people become educated. That, like I always tell people, it doesn't take Junia to make change. It actually takes thoughts too. So I'll definitely throw that in both of the comments. For the second part of that, it's really difficult, right? I was on the phone for 4 hours during that tribal consultation last week and hearing from other tribes and what they want. For our group locally that I know of, and here's the interesting part, is my tribal government has not input a letter. I know, because I went to council and the executive and asked if they were. So that's why I encourage all of you good people to write to the consultations at so then that way our voices can be heard, because even our own tribal governments are not taking action. So some of the things that I have heard are directly what our Healing Council is doing already. We want recognition that this was indeed genocide. We want this to be amplified with some of our teaching. We want simple things as more healthcare fund dollars to go towards things like parenting classes, because we can't stop generational trauma unless we're taking action to correct it. So while everyone learns about ACEs, adverse childhood effects, we're not actually doing enough to stop those. So advocating for healthcare dollars, advocating for some of those nonprofits who are doing some of the work so that they can get funding, talking to survivors. That's another thing I've heard. A lot of people want acknowledgement for wrongdoings. I've heard as much as, and this is going to be a little joking, so hope y'all get my Indian sense of humor. I had an elder say the other day, she's like, they really taught us how to do this at school, right? We knew what that meant back in the day. But then she said, you know what it really means? Take your shit down and take it with you. So we even have people who are like, we want land back. A lot of these, especially by the Christian missionaries, were done from our land that we gifted to be saved. Okay. So why as a people can't we write and say, hey, we're saved, we want our land back? So it's very diverse in our communities as to what people want. There's even a portion of my community when I started doing this good work in July, mainly out of frustration, quite honestly, because while I was mourning our relatives in Canada, I was having people not recognize that this was here. And I said, wait until you found out about our brothers and sisters in the South. Like, this is all throughout Turtle Island. And there was people even in my own community who said, we did stuff in 1997, we're good. I was only 17. I had no idea about the historical trauma that I was carrying with me for generations. So, I mean, it's very, very mixed. I just encourage everybody to put their voice in with that consultation so they realize that the limited scope they have is just that, limited. And that we need to voice as a people, even as survivors of descendants of survivors, and how that's affected. So that's what I encourage. I don't have like a solid answer for that one. I've heard the whole gambit of solutions.
And I just want to highlight a few talking points again that I think are very important. The fact that the majority of these schools were Catholic run or religious based run, and they're not acknowledging that in their basic definition. Absolutely, we need to at least voice the opinion that those need to be included, because otherwise it is a completely limited scope, entirely too limited. Some of the other things that spoke to me, and again, I thank you so much for doing this heavy work, is what it is. The partner who told her partner finally when she spoke up that she had experienced trauma. I found out just today from my mother that two of my uncles attended a school in Oklahoma and they had very difficult time. And I'm 37 and just finding this out today because I'm doing this. So certainly it affects all Indigenous communities. And again, I just want to thank you for this very, very important work that you're doing.
Miigwech for that. It's and you know, I'm not surprised, Sergeant, quite honestly, because one of the hardest groups of survivors to come forward are our men. And it's very difficult to support them sometimes because I'm a woman and I have different teachings. And so we do have a couple men who have come forward and said, how can I help my brothers and my relations also realize that it's okay to have emotions? It's okay to know that this affected you. So I appreciate you saying that because it is very difficult to work with male survivors.
And I'm getting a message that we might have one other question.
From Nicole.
Mhm.
The idea is to send a testimony email to the consultation people or have a certain ask, or some or both. So Nicole, I can let me share this real quick, okay? Because I know I had it in my presentation. So what they're really looking for, this is the whole list of things that they're looking for consultation. And what's interesting about this is the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, NAGPRA, is only eligible on federal like lands, right? And not at the churches. So when Graham was actually talking about their working definition of what boarding schools is, I categorized everything in my letter under other issues the department should address in its review. The working definition of Indian boarding schools that they are doing for this initiative, because part of the initiative is to have that report out to Congress to say, hey, this is what's going on. And we have heard from people saying our definition is not a good definition based on all of the schools that we're operating. So this is like a main list of the things that the consultations are looking for with their initiative, with that report to Congress in April. But then again, I would argue any other issues the department should address should be included underneath that last bullet point. And then I'll make sure, so it's consultation@bia.gov, and that is the email that you can send out. You can go to the BIA's website, or even Google the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative, and it will come up with, if you need, they are even accepting comments orally. So you can call in and talk to someone and they will record your comments. And I think that's wonderful because then they're acknowledging that we are an oral people. And that writing is relatively generationally new for us. So that's all of the comments, either written or oral, are due by December 23rd because they backed out that date. So then again, this is also the list of really what they're looking for those notes. So I encourage everyone and anyone to put forward to consultation at BIA.gov. And then I also put in the chat, which I don't know if goes to the other chat, the Miigwech Inc. So if you want to know what we're doing locally to look at like grassroots, so maybe you don't know what to put in that consultation letter, I would say highlight, copy and paste what we have already put together as what we deem important as a grassroots organization doing this good work. So if you don't know what to write, your definition needs to be more broad, and hey, healing. And that also will show you the links on the side, because there's a little bit of updating that needs to happen, but that will also allow you to get into our Facebook group. And I do ask everyone, please answer the questions, otherwise I don't let you in, because I always want to make sure that Indigenous voices are amplified. And then, but you can see it publicly without joining. And we do put updates in there because I do a monthly update with a PDF. So, and then there's just really good resources that we have on there too.
What I have found that works when I need letters written is that I've like made an event page on Facebook, And I put all the information there and then I blast it out to everybody so that people know there's an event going on and to do this letter thing. And I even put like copy of a letter or something in there and the address. And that has worked a lot. I think we get more letters that way. So that's something that has worked for me. I hope it helps.
Eva, are you ready to do the raffle?
So I think we're gonna first. Got my little jug. Good thing I bought these Christmas cookies at Menards.
Christmas cookies are always good. Is that
All
part
right,
of it?
here we go. Is everybody ready? Our first winner is for the quilts.
Woo-hoo.
Oh, and the winner is this one right here. The winner is number 2325320. 2325320. Ethel.
Ethel. Oh, that's so cool.
Yep.
Yay.
All right. And our second prize is the $25 gift card. And that is going to go to this one right here. 2325314. 314. Linda Schuyler.
Oh.
And that's the gift card.
Yay.
And the next thing is the picture from Colleen Ford, the watercolor.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty.
And that one's going to go to this one here. 2325243. 2325243. Abby Fergus.
Oh,
She gets the watercolor.
she was part of the wolf topics or the town hall.
Awesome. And then last but not least, that beautiful fashion statement by our very own Andrea Pierce is going to this one right here, which is 2325349. Deb Gino.
Oh, yay.
And she wins that wonderful skirt.
Awesome. Congratulations, everybody. Yay.
So congratulations to all of our winners, and thank you so much for participating in our first ever town hall ticket raffle. And this was kind of fun, so we'll probably do it again sometime. So thank you all so much.
Woohoo. Quilt.
And thank you again, Meredith, for the great education we received here, and keep in touch because the caucus, we can support each other.
Mhm.
And yeah, yep. So, and thank you, Graham, and Cammie, and Andrea, and Eva.
And seriously, think about getting people to run against the Moose and Schmidt. That's how we make these changes.
Well,